Before you say, I do, before you walk down that aisle, before you give your heart and your future to someone forever. Watch this. Because what you're about to hear is not just a story, it's a warning, a whisper from someone who once stood exactly where you're standing right now, full of hope, full of dreams, completely unaware of the storm that was quietly brewing behind her. This story is raw. It's real. It's messy. And if you listen closely, if you open your heart for just a few minutes, it just might save your wedding, it just might help you to live cautiously, to avoid making costly mistakes. You see, love is beautiful. Marriage? Even more so. But not every smile at your engagement party is genuine. Not every friend that helps you pick out your wedding dress is truly happy for you. And sometimes, just sometimes, the greatest betrayal doesn't come from your enemies, but from the one person you call your best friend. This story isn't to scare you, it's to open your eyes. Because every wedding has a story, but not all of them end with a kiss and happily ever after. So before you finalize that wedding guest list, before you post that engagement ring on your status, before you let just anyone into the most sacred season of your life, you need to watch this. So take a deep breath, hold your heart close, and lean in, because this is not just a story. It's a lesson in disguise. Just as the wedding ceremony was about to reach its most sacred moment, when the pastor was about to pronounce them husband and wife, everything came to a screeching halt. A figure in the back of the church stood up, Silas, the man who Lydia had secretly hired for this very moment. His presence was like a dark shadow in the room, his movements calculated and deliberate. His eyes met Clara's for the briefest moment before he began walking toward the altar with purpose. Clara's heart dropped as he approached the front, the heavy silence in the church now filled with dread. Her breath caught in her throat. "What's going on?" she whispered to herself. "Stop the ceremony," Silas called out, his voice loud and commanding, drawing the attention of everyone in the room. The guests shifted in their seats, confusion spreading through the congregation. From the back of the church, Silas walked down the aisle, his presence commanding attention. In his hand was a large video camera. He moved with purpose, stepping towards the altar with a cold, almost eerie determination. Before we'll begin this gripping true story, we invite you to subscribe to our channel. Don't forget to like and share this video and comment where you are watching from. Lydia and Clara had been inseparable since their university days. Their friendship was built on years of shared experiences, but under the surface, it was a tale of two very different worlds. Lydia was everything her parents could never have imagined. She grew up in a strict, religious home with a father, Mr. Anthony, who was a well-known pastor in their community. Her mother, who was a housewife, spent her days cooking, cleaning, and raising Lydia to be the perfect Christian girl. But Lydia was different. The more she tried to fit into the box her parents had created for her, the more she found herself drawn to the wild side of life. Back in university, Lydia had a reputation you couldn't miss her. She had this fearless flair, rocking outfits that walked the perfect line between daring and tasteful, just enough to make the boys look twice, but there was more to Lydia than her outward appearance. Beneath the surface, she lived a secret life, one filled with wealthy men who paid her handsomely for her service. She was a prostitute while on campus. She didn't care about love or affection. She was in it for the money that could pay for the luxuries her parents would never approve of. Lydia knew that if her parents ever found out about her lifestyle, it would be the end of her. She couldn't risk disappointing them, especially her father, whose sermons often spoke of the dangers of promiscuity. Lydia worked hard to keep her two lives separate. When she went home, she wore modest clothes in pretense, as if she was a perfect pastor's daughter. But when she stepped out into the world, Lydia was a different person. Whereas her best friend Clara was a complete opposite, Clara was a good girl through and through. She came from a middle-class family with a father who was a respected professor at the university and a mother who worked as a primary school teacher. Clara had always been the diligent student, the one who lived by the rules and never strayed. Unlike Lydia, Clara never sought validation through others, especially not men. She didn't need a sugar daddy or a wealthy man to make her feel special. Clara had built her life on hard work, on studying late into the night and keeping a firm grip on her morals. She was indeed an embodiment of everything Lydia wished she could be: pure, focused, and free from the chaos that defined Lydia's life. One afternoon, after finishing their classes, Clara sat with Lydia in their shared room, reading through her notes for an upcoming exam. Lydia, on the other hand, was lounging on the bed, flipping through her phone, texting one of her many sugar daddies. "Clara," Lydia said, her voice casual but with a hint of something more. "You ever wonder what it's like to just not care about the rules?" Clara glanced up from her notes, raising an eyebrow. What do you mean? I mean, life. Like not stressing over grades. Not worrying about whether your parents approve of everything you do. Lydia leaned back on the bed, letting her phone fall to the side. Just living, like really living, without any of the responsibility. Clara smiled softly, shaking her head. Lydia, I've always believed that following the right path is what makes you free. The world might try to tell you that breaking the rules will set you free, but all it does is create chaos. I see the way you live and I can't help but wonder if you're truly happy. Lydia's face hardened for a moment. I am fine, Clara. You have no idea what it's like to have all this pressure on you. I see you don't really worry about money or impressing anyone because your parents are capable of footing your bills. Your life looks so perfect, so easy, but you don't know how it feels like to swallow your pride, do things you hate, and still smile just to survive. Clara set her notes down, her voice calm and gentle. You think I have it easy, but you're wrong. I'm doing my best to get through this university thing. And I know it's not always easy to follow the rules, but there's a better way, Lydia. You don't have to live like this. Lydia let out a bitter laugh. Oh, and what's your way, Clara? Study hard, be the good girl, get a good job, and marry some perfect guy? That's your plan? Trust me, life doesn't work like that. You have to make things happen. You have to take what you want. Clara's eyes darkened slightly. I'm not saying you shouldn't go after what you want, Lydia, but you don't have to compromise yourself to get there. I don't need to sleep with men to get what I want. I can work hard for it. And so you can. Lydia's eyes flickered with annoyance, but she forced a smile. You're so naive, Clara. You think it's that simple? The world doesn't work the way you want it to. Some of us have to do things we don't like to survive. You should know that by now. Things aren't always as perfect as they seem. Clara fell silent, her heart heavy with concern for her friend. She knew Lydia's life wasn't as perfect as it appeared, but she had no idea how deep the darkness ran. It was around this time that something happened that would change everything, something that would set off a chain of events neither Clara nor Lydia could have predicted. It was a bright afternoon when Stephen, the student union government president of Thayer University, came knocking on their door. Lydia's heart raced when she saw him standing in front of her, looking as handsome as ever, his confident smile lighting up his face. Stephen was a man everyone admired, and Lydia had secretly admired him from afar for as long as she could remember. Hey, Stephen, she said with a grin, waving at him. Stephen responded, Please, is Clara around? I need to speak with her. Lydia's stomach twisted, her jealousy flaring up as she stepped aside to let him in. She's not here, she said, trying to keep her voice steady. She went to class. Stephen's smile faltered slightly, but he nodded. Okay, thanks. Lydia stepped forward, her voice softer now. You can stay and wait for her. I mean, I could offer you something to drink, or we could talk while you wait for her. Stephen shook his head, clearly uncomfortable. No, I think I will come back next time. Thanks. Lydia smiled, though her heart was sinking. She had hoped for something more, something that would make her feel special, but it was clear that Stephen wasn't interested in her. He wasn't interested in her the way he was interested in Clara. After Stephen left, Lydia couldn't shake the feeling of resentment that had taken root inside her. She had always felt like she was in Clara's shadow, and now, seeing the way Stephen is interested in Clara, the jealousy within her began to burn hotter. That night, as Clara returned from class, she shared the news with Lydia. You won't believe it. I met Stephen, the SUG president, while coming back. He said he's been thinking about me a lot lately and he really wants to get to know me better. Lydia's smile faltered. Really? She said, trying to keep her tone even. And how do you feel about that? Clara beamed, her eyes shining with excitement. I think he's amazing. I never expected him to notice me, but now. I'm excited to see where this could go. But Lydia wasn't happy for her. The jealousy she had tried to suppress bubbled to the surface. Be careful, Clara, she said with a forced smile. Men like Stephen, they don't always have good intentions. Clara waved her hand dismissively. You're just being overprotective, Lydia. I know what I'm doing. But inside, Lydia's heart was filled with bitterness. She knew this was only the beginning of something that would change everything. She wasn't ready to lose Stephen to Clara, not without a fight. And so, the seeds of envy were planted. That evening, after Clara had gone out to meet Stephen, Lydia sat alone in their apartment, her mind filled with dark thoughts. She replayed their conversations over and over, each one a reminder of how Clara was slipping away from her. She had been her best friend for years, but now it felt as if she were losing her to Stephen. It wasn't just that Clara was with him now, it was the fact that Clara had everything. She had the purity, the moral compass, the love of a good man. Everything Lydia didn't have. But Lydia didn't expect what was coming next. What she didn't know was that fate had something far darker in store for Clara, something that would forever change the trajectory of their lives. Clara was walking to class one Tuesday afternoon when her phone buzzed, an unfamiliar number flashing on the screen. She swiped the screen, not thinking much of it. "Hello? Clara, it's Dr. Okoro, your family's doctor. I'm afraid I have some bad news." The voice on the other end of the line was shaky, filled with an uneasy tone. Clara's heart dropped instantly. "Bad news? What happened? Is everything okay with my parents?" Her voice quivered. I'm afraid your parents, they've been in an accident. You need to come to the hospital right away." The words hit Clara like a truck. Her legs buckled under her and she nearly dropped the phone in shock. "What do you mean, sir?" I'm so sorry, Clara. Please come quickly." Clara couldn't even remember how she got to the hospital. She was numb, her mind in a fog. She rushed inside, barely aware of the people around her, until Dr. Okoro met her in the hallway. "Clara," the doctor said gently, his face filled with sorrow. "Please follow me." She nodded wordlessly, her breath coming in short gasps. Her feet moved mechanically as the doctor led her through the hospital's corridors. They reached a quiet, sterile ward, and Clara was led to a room where two bodies lay covered with white sheets. "No, this can't be real," she whispered to herself, shaking her head. "This can't be happening." The doctor sighed deeply. "I'm truly sorry, Clara. Your mother and father, they didn't make it." Clara's knees buckled and she collapsed to the floor in shock, her hands trembling as she touched the sheets that covered her parents' bodies. Her vision blurred and everything around her felt as though it was spinning. No, she whispered through choking sobs. "This can't be true. They can't be gone. They can't." She peeled the sheets away, revealing the faces of her parents, pale and lifeless. Her tears flowed uncontrollably, her chest tight with grief. She felt like she was drowning, her entire world shattering before her. Back at the apartment, Lydia sat alone, scrolling through her phone when she heard the front door slam open. Clara rushed in, her face pale and streaked with tears. Her chest heaved as she stumbled into the room, her heart hammering in her chest. "Clara?" Lydia stood up, confused. "What's wrong?" Clara could barely speak through her sobs. She collapsed onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. "They're gone, Lydia, they're gone, my parents." Lydia's heart sank, a sudden pang of guilt mixed with disbelief. She quickly knelt beside Clara, wrapping her arms around her in an attempt to comfort her, though she wasn't sure if she even knew how. "I'm so sorry, Clara," Lydia whispered, her voice softer than it had been in days. "I don't know what to say." Clara cried harder, her sobs racking her body. "They died in a car accident. I was too late. I could not save them." Lydia's chest tightened. She knew Clara's parents was everything to her. She couldn't even begin to imagine the pain her friend Clara was feeling. But inside, she felt something stir, something darker. A voice whispered in her mind, "Clara's pain is your chance to get closer to Stephen." But she pushed it away. For now, all she could do was comfort her friend, even if her heart was tangled in envy and bitterness. The next few days were a blur of funeral arrangements, mourning, and the overwhelming weight of Clara's loss. The bank seized the family home, and Clara was left with nothing but the memories of the life she had once known. She felt like she was falling into a deep pit of despair, struggling to keep everything together. Lydia had taken the role of the supportive friend, offering comfort, food, and an ear to listen, though part of her mind was still plotting her next move. Yet, despite the storm raging within her, she couldn't help but feel a strange sense of victory as Clara struggled. One afternoon, as Clara sat by the window, staring blankly out at the world, Lydia came into the room. "You should go home to your parents' village, Clara," Lydia suggested softly. "Maybe spending some time there with your family will help you heal." Clara looked up at her with empty eyes. "I don't know if I can go back there, Lydia. I'm not sure I can face it. Everything's gone. I'm alone now." Lydia sat next to her, placing a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You're not alone, Clara. You still have me. I'll be here for you, no matter what. And we'll figure out a way to move forward together." Clara turned to face Lydia, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you. You're the only one who's been here for me. I don't know what I would do without you." Lydia smiled, though it was out of pretense. "You don't have to worry about that. I'll always be here for you." As the days passed, Clara's situation grew more dire. The bank had taken the family house and there was no money to pay for her education or her living expenses. She tried everything she could think of, from selling some of her parents' belongings to borrowing money from friends, but nothing was enough. Her final exams were quickly approaching and she couldn't afford to pay for her fees. Clara sat down one evening, her head in her hands, trying to figure out what to do next. That's when Lydia came to her with an idea. "You know," Lydia said, her voice filled with a false sympathy, "I might be able to help you. I know some people who could help. Big men who have money to spare." Clara looked up at her, confusion crossing her face. "What do you mean? Help with what?" Lydia leaned in closer, her tone low and secretive. "You can make some money, Clara. All you have to do is spend a little time with them, sleep them. They'll give you whatever you need. I could introduce you to them." Clara recoiled, her face filled with shock and disgust. "What? No, Lydia. I won't do that. I'd rather starve than do something like that." Lydia shrugged, feigning indifference. "It's your choice, Clara. But think about it. You're running out of options." Clara's chest tightened as Lydia's words echoed in her mind. Could she really go through with it? Would she lose her morals, integrity, and innocence just to survive? Lydia stood up, walking toward the door. "Just think about it. I'm here if you change your mind." Clara sat in the corner of the apartment, her hands trembling as she stared at the bank statement in front of her. The numbers blurred together, but one thing was clear: there was no way she could afford the fees for her final exams. She had nothing left. Her parents were gone, their life savings had been seized, and her dreams of graduating with a first-class honors were slipping further away with each passing day. Lydia, sitting across from her, watched the scene unfold with a cold, calculating gaze. She had been waiting for this moment, and now it was here. Clara's desperation had reached its peak. Clara finally broke the silence. "Lydia, I don't know what to do. I can't pay for my exams and I have nowhere to go. It will be unfair if I drop out of school at this stage. My parents would never want this." Lydia's voice was soft, laced with a false empathy. "I understand, Clara. I really do. But I have told you to fix this. A way to get the money you need. If you're willing to make the sacrifice." Clara's head shot up, confusion and fear written all over her face. "What do you mean, Lydia? How do you expect me to commit such sinful act just to raise money?" "No. I would never do something like that, Lydia. I would rather figure something out myself." Lydia shrugged, pretending to be casual about it. "It's your choice, Clara. But you can't keep living in this fantasy world. The reality is, sometimes we have to do things we don't want to in order to survive. You know how the world works. I'm just offering a way out as a concerned friend." Clara's eyes filled with tears as she stood up, pacing the room. Her chest felt tight, as if the weight of the world was pressing down on her. "I don't want to be like you, Lydia. I don't want to sell myself just to survive. I thought we were friends. I thought you cared about me." Lydia stood up too, her expression momentarily serious, though her eyes still held the same calculating glint. "I do care about you, Clara. That's why I'm offering you this. You're my best friend and I just want to help you. But you have to understand, sometimes you have to do what it takes to get ahead. And this is your chance." Clara shook her head, her voice. "The world isn't kind and it doesn't care about your morals. I have been in this world for a long time and I'm trying to save you from the disappointment you're about to face. Don't say I didn't warn you." Clara sat back down, her face crumpling with the weight of everything. "I don't know what to do. I don't want to let my parents down, but I feel like I've already lost everything." Lydia stepped closer, her voice low and comforting, though it still carried that edge of persuasion. "You haven't lost everything. You're still here. You have options. Think about your future, Clara. Think about what you want out of life. You deserve more than this, more than scraping by, struggling every day. I'm giving you a way out. All you have to do is accept it." Clara sat in silence, the room heavy with the tension between them. She could hear Lydia's words echoing in her mind, but something deep within her screamed to refuse. This wasn't who she was. This wasn't what her parents would have wanted for her. She was supposed to be better than this. But what if there was no other way? The next morning, Clara went out to clear her head, walking aimlessly around the campus. The weight of the world felt like it was on her shoulders. Her mind kept drifting back to Lydia's words. A way out. Could it really be that simple? She passed by a small cafe, and as she was about to walk in, she froze. Stephen was sitting at a table outside, talking to a friend. His deep voice carried across the sidewalk, and Clara's heart skipped a beat as she caught sight of him. Stephen noticed her almost immediately. His face lit up with a warm smile as he waved her over. "Clara. Hey, come join me." Clara hesitated for a moment before walking over to him, her heart racing. She couldn't bring herself to smile. Instead, she sat down, trying to force a calm expression. "Hey, Stephen," she said softly, her voice shaky. Stephen looked at her closely, his smile fading just a little as he noticed how pale she looked. "Are you okay? You don't look like yourself." Clara forced a smile, but it didn't reach her eyes. I'm fine, just stressed. You know, finals and everything. He studied her for a moment before leaning in slightly, his tone more serious. Clara, if you ever need to talk, I'm here for you. I mean it. You've been through a lot lately. And I care about you. Clara's heart clenched at his words. She wanted to tell him everything, to break down in front of him and share all of her pain. But she couldn't. She couldn't let him see her like this. I appreciate that, Stephen, she said quietly, her eyes downcast. But there's something I need to figure out on my own. Stephen reached across the table and gently placed his hand over hers. His touch was warm, comforting. You don't have to do it alone, Clara. You have me. Let me help you. Clara's chest tightened. She pulled her hand away, not out of anger, but because she didn't want to drag him into the mess that was her life. I don't want to burden you, Stephen. You've already done so much for me. Stephen gave her a soft, understanding look. Clara, you could never be a burden to me. You're important to me. More than you know. Clara's breath hitched in her throat as his words sank in. She wanted to believe him, to feel the warmth of his affection, but she couldn't escape the nagging feeling in the back of her mind. What if I can get out of this on my own? The conversation lingered in her mind long after she left the cafe. The words, you don't have to do it alone, echoed in her head like a lifeline. But could she really trust him? Could she really lean on someone else when she had always prided herself to be independent? Later that evening, Clara sat on the edge of her bed, her phone in her hands. She stared at the screen, reading Lydia's message for what felt like the 100th time. Think about what I said, Clara. I'm still here if you need help. You don't have to do this alone. Tears welled in Clara's eyes as she stared at the screen. She wanted to believe she could do this on her own, that she could rise above the temptation. But the fear of failure, the fear of losing everything, was overwhelming. She closed her eyes, her heart pounding. The choice was hers. Would she hold onto her values and morals, or would she give in to the pressure, the temptation, and walk down the path Lydia had suggested? The answer wasn't clear yet, but as Clara's thoughts swirled in confusion, she knew that her life was about to change in ways she could not yet imagine. The days following Clara's encounter with Stephen were a blur. Her mind was still heavy with the weight of her decisions, the pressure to figure out what came next. She couldn't stop thinking about Lydia's offer, the tempting escape that she knew deep down was wrong. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw the image of her parents' lifeless bodies, and the haunting reminder that everything they worked for was slipping through her fingers. But life, as it often does, didn't wait for Clara to sort through her emotions, kept moving forward, indifferent to her pain. One fateful afternoon, as Clara and her younger brother Caleb were out running errands to get some money to survive, the worst possible thing happened. They had just finished a quick stop at the corner store when Clara's phone rang. The call was from an unknown number. Hello, Clara answered, hoping it was nothing more than a wrong number. Clara, a voice said urgently on the other end. It's the hospital, your brother John. He's been hit by a car. Clara felt her world collapse around her. What? What do you mean he's been hit? Is he okay? We need you to come here right away, Clara. He's in a critical condition. Clara dropped the phone, her hand shaking violently. Caleb, who had been standing beside her, noticed the change in her face immediately. What's wrong? He asked, his voice laced with concern. Clara looked at him, her eyes wide with fear and disbelief. It's John. He's been hit by a car. We need to go now. The ride to the hospital was a blur of red lights and screeching tires, Clara's hands clutching the passenger seat as if it could somehow keep her grounded. Caleb sat in the back, his eyes wide with fear, but no words seemed to leave his mouth. He didn't know what to say, none of them did. When they finally arrived, Clara rushed inside the hospital, her legs weak and her breath coming in short bursts. Dr. Okoro, the same doctor who had given her the worst news of her life just a few weeks ago, was waiting for her. Clara, the doctor said gravely, we tried, but I'm afraid. We couldn't save John, your brother. He didn't make it. Clara's knees gave out beneath her and she collapsed on the floor, her hands gripping her chest. No, 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 she screamed, her voice raw and full of anguish. I can't lose him too. I can't. Please, don't take him from me. Dr. Okoro knelt beside her, his face etched with sympathy. I'm so sorry, Clara. We did everything we could. Clara's cries echoed through the sterile hospital corridor, a sound of pure, unrelenting grief. Her entire world felt like it was falling apart again. First, her parents, now her brother. The weight of everything was unbearable. Caleb, standing a few feet behind her, could barely understand what was happening. He was confused, frozen in place by the overwhelming sadness that hung in the air. He approached Clara slowly, kneeling beside her and placing a trembling hand on her back. "We can't lose him, Caleb," Clara whispered, her voice breaking. "He's all I have left. He's all I have left now." Back at the apartment, Lydia watched from the window as Clara and Caleb returned home. Clara's eyes were red, her face pale and marked with tears. Lydia's heart twisted. She had always believed in looking out for herself first, but the pain radiating from Clara was impossible to ignore. Lydia had never lost someone close to her like this, but she could imagine the agony Clara must be feeling. She couldn't help but feel a pang of guilt in her chest. As Clara walked through the door, Lydia stood up from the couch, her voice soft, hesitant. "Clara, I'm so sorry. I can't imagine what you're going through right now." Clara didn't respond immediately. She just stood there, staring at the ground. Her brother Caleb was behind her, his eyes dark and distant, clearly still in shock. "Clara, talk to me," Lydia urged, walking slowly toward her friend. Clara's eyes finally lifted and Lydia could see the hollow emptiness in them. The light that had once sparkled in Clara's eyes was gone, replaced with an unfathomable sadness. I don't know what to do anymore, Lydia," Clara whispered, her voice barely audible. "I've lost everyone. My parents. My brother. I'm all alone now. I have nothing left." Lydia moved closer, wrapping her arms around Clara. She felt the tremble in her friend's body, the weight of her grief, and for the first time in a long while, Lydia felt a genuine desire to comfort her. But there was still something cold inside her. Something she couldn't shake. "I'm here for you, Clara," Lydia said, her voice filled with false warmth. "You don't have to go through this alone." Clara clung to her, her sobs shaking her entire body. "How am I supposed to move forward, Lydia? How do I keep going when it feels like everything's been taken from me?" Lydia didn't know how to answer. She could tell Clara wanted more than just words. She wanted to feel safe, to have something to hold onto. But Lydia was at a loss, unsure of what to say. For a fleeting moment, she wondered if this was her chance getting Stephen. Her chance of outshining Clara in everything, because she has always envied Clara. So she wondered if Clara's pain could be the answer to all her problems. But something inside her recoiled at the thought. Lydia's emotions were torn in two. She had always wanted what Clara had. But seeing her in so much pain made her realize how stupid her desire truly was. Was this really the victory she had been looking for? "I'll help you, Clara," Lydia said again, her voice softer now. "You don't have to face this alone. We'll get through it together." But deep down, Lydia knew things would never be the same. She could no longer tell if her actions came from a place of love or selfishness. Clara's grief had consumed her in ways Lydia couldn't yet understand, and for the first time in her life, she questioned the choices she had made. Over the next few days, the apartment was filled with the quiet sounds of mourning. The house felt colder without John's laughter and lighthearted presence. Clara and Caleb struggled to get through each day, trying to pick up the pieces of their shattered lives. As the funeral passed in a blur of tears and sorrow, Clara's grief deepened. She began to withdraw from everyone, retreating into herself. Lydia continued to offer her support, but the distance between them grew even though Clara didn't realize it yet. The tragedy of John's death had affected them both, but for different reasons. Lydia was still struggling with her own demons, torn between loyalty to Clara and her growing resentment of her friend's purity. Clara, on the other hand, was trying to keep her head above water in a world that seemed to keep taking everything from her. But the hardest part was yet to come. Lydia could see it, Clara's next step, the inevitable choice she would have to make. Would she continue to live in the light, or would she, too, give in to the darkness that Lydia had once embraced? The days following John's funeral felt like a haze to Clara. The sadness had settled in like a thick fog, clouding her every thought. She barely left the apartment. Each day felt like an endless cycle of waking up, staring at the walls, and trying to find the strength to continue. But the weight of her grief and the overwhelming sense of responsibility for her younger brother, Caleb, was becoming too much. She couldn't sleep. She couldn't think straight. Clara looked over at her brother, sleeping so peacefully, unaware of the war raging in her soul. She held her chest and sobbed quietly. It was her breaking point, I'll do it, she whispered. But not because I want to. She looked up at Lydia, tears streaming down her cheeks. I'm doing this because life has backed me into a corner. Because my brother cannot starve. Because I refuse to watch everything I've worked for crumble. Lydia pulled her into a hug. I understand, Clara. And I've got you. The next day, as Clara sat on the couch staring at the blank television screen, Lydia entered the room with a slight smile on her face, as if she had just come from a meeting with someone important. Clara barely glanced up, but Lydia was already beside her, sitting down in a way that was almost predatory. Clara, Lydia began softly, her voice calm but with an underlying tone of excitement. I've arranged everything for you. I have made the connection. Clara froze, her breath catching in her throat. What are you talking about, Lydia? Lydia leaned in, her eyes glinting with something sharp and calculating. I set it up with Chief Baligan. He's waiting for you, Clara. You can meet him tomorrow. And trust me, the money will be more than enough for your exams, for the rent, for everything. Clara's stomach turned. The guilt gnawed at her, but a part of her, a part she hated, was telling her that this was the only way. She looked at Lydia, her voice trembling. I don't know if I can do this, Lydia. I just don't know if I'm strong enough. I don't want to become like you. I don't want to lose myself. Lydia's expression softened, though it still held a trace of something darker. You're not losing yourself, Clara. You're just accepting what you have to do to survive. You'll be helping yourself and your family. Trust me, after this, everything will change for the better. And you won't regret it. Clara's eyes filled with tears as she looked at Lydia, a million emotions flooding through her. She felt betrayed by the friend she had trusted so much, but at the same time she felt like she had no choice but to give in. Please, don't make me do this, Clara whispered, her voice breaking. I don't know what's happening to me. I don't want to be part of this world. I don't want to lose myself. Lydia placed a hand on Clara's, her touch cold and unfeeling. You won't lose yourself, Clara. You're just taking a step forward. And I'll be there with you the whole way. Clara swallowed hard, wiping away a tear that had escaped her eye. She looked at Lydia and, for a moment, saw a glimpse of the girl she used to know. The girl who was her best friend. The girl who had been there for her. But that girl was slipping away, replaced by someone else. Someone who would do anything to survive. And in that moment, Clara knew that Lydia had already won. The pressure was too much, and she had no other options. The next day, Lydia took Clara to the hotel where the meeting was set up. The room was dimly lit, the air heavy with an uncomfortable tension that Clara could feel in her bones. Her heart pounded in her chest, and every step she took felt like a betrayal. Lydia's voice was a soft whisper beside her. Just follow my lead. Everything will be fine. As they entered the room, Clara's gaze landed on Chief Baligan. He was an elderly man, tall and imposing, with a stern expression on his face. He was dressed in an expensive suit, the kind of suit that screamed wealth and power. His eyes swept over Clara with an intensity that made her skin crawl, and for a moment she felt like a piece of meat on display. Ah, Clara, Chief Baligan said with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. It's good to finally meet you. Clara's throat felt tight, but she managed to force a smile, though it didn't feel real. Nice to meet you, Chief Baligan. Lydia stood back, her arms crossed over her chest, watching the scene unfold. Clara's eyes flicked to her, but Lydia's face was unreadable, as if this was just another part of the plan. Chief Baligan stepped closer to Clara, his gaze lingering on her with an unsettling intensity. I hear you've been through quite a lot. I can help you, Clara. All you have to do is spend some time with me. No one will know, and everything you need will be taken care of. Clara felt sick to her stomach. This wasn't what she wanted. This wasn't her. But she had no choice, did she? She had no choice if she wanted to survive, if she wanted to keep her promise to Caleb. But as she looked into Lydia's eyes, something shifted in her. There was no turning back now. She had crossed a line, and she couldn't go back to the person she once was. That night, after the sleeping with Chief Baligan, Clara lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The guilt weighed on her chest like a heavy stone, and every moment she closed her eyes, the image of Lydia's satisfied smile, the coldness in Chief Baligan's gaze, haunted her. She had done it. She had crossed the line. But just as she thought about the consequences, her phone buzzed. It was a message from Stephen. Clara, I need to see you. I can't stop thinking about you. Can we meet up tomorrow? Clara's heart skipped a beat. She stared at the message for a long time, torn between the love she felt for Stephen and the dark path she had just walked down. How could she tell him the truth? How could she face him knowing what she had done? She typed out a response, her fingers trembling. "I'm not sure I'm ready, Stephen. I need time to think." As she hit send, Clara couldn't help but wonder if this was the end of her story with Stephen, if he would ever look at her the same way again. But she didn't have time to dwell on that thought. She had made her choice. And now there was no turning back. The days after Clara's meeting with Chief Balogun blurred together in a haze of guilt and confusion. She had crossed a line she never thought she would, and now she felt as if she were standing at the edge of a precipice, looking down into the abyss. Every step she took seemed to pull her further from the life she had once known. Clara could barely look at herself in the mirror anymore. The reflection staring back at her was a stranger, someone she no longer recognized. She had sold a piece of herself, a piece of the girl she used to be, for a price she couldn't even fathom. Lydia, on the other hand, was acting as if everything was normal. She continued to encourage Clara, assuring her that everything would work out. But every time Clara saw the glint of satisfaction in Lydia's eyes, a part of her recoiled. Deep down, she knew Lydia wasn't the friend she thought she was. One evening, Clara sat on the couch, her knees drawn to her chest, staring out the window at the darkened streets. Caleb was in his room, and the apartment was eerily quiet. Her phone buzzed, breaking the silence. It was a message from Stephen. "Clara, please, I need to see you. I can't stop thinking about you. We need to talk." Her heart clenched. It had been days since she'd last seen Stephen, and though she longed to hold him, to feel the warmth of his embrace, she knew that the truth was too heavy to carry. How could she face him after what she had done? She sat there for a moment, debating whether or not to respond. But the thought of losing Stephen forever terrified her. She could feel his sincerity, the way he cared for her, and the last thing she wanted was to break that connection. Finally, she typed a response. "I'm sorry, Stephen. I don't think I'm ready to talk right now. I'm going through a lot." She hit. Was this the right decision? She missed him more than she could admit. But how could she look him in the eye knowing what she had done? The next day, as the hours dragged on, Clara found herself consumed by her thoughts. Every part of her body ached with the weight of her choices, and no matter how much she tried to push them away, they kept resurfacing. She could no longer escape the truth of what she had become. That afternoon, as she sat by the window, Lydia walked into the room. She looked at Clara, her face unreadable. "Clara," Lydia began, her voice soft but firm. "I know you're struggling with what happened, but you've made the right choice. Don't let this guilt eat you up." Clara slowly turned to face her, her eyes hollow. "Right choice?" she echoed, the words tasting like acid on her tongue. "How can you say that, Lydia? I can't even look at myself anymore. I feel like I've lost who I am. I betrayed everything I've ever believed in." Lydia's expression softened, though there was still a coldness to it. "You haven't lost yourself, Clara. You've just found a new way to survive. This is what the world demands of you, and now you have the power to take control of your life. You can have everything you want now, the money, the success, the life you've dreamed of." Clara shook her head, the tears threatening to spill. "But at what cost, Lydia? At what cost? I've sacrificed everything, my dignity, my self-respect, and for what? A few moments of money? What happens when that's all gone? What's left of me?" Lydia stepped closer, her voice lowering, though it still carried that insistent tone. "Clara, you're not listening to me. You've done what you needed to do. Don't let guilt ruin it. You've crossed a line, yes, but that line was always there. You just had to decide if you wanted to take the step. And you did. Now you can move forward." Clara turned away, the pain in her chest unbearable. "I don't know if I can," she whispered. "I don't know how to move forward with this weight on my heart." Lydia watched her with a calculating gaze, her lips pressing together as if choosing her next words carefully. "You can do this, Clara. You're stronger than you think." But Clara didn't feel strong. She felt broken, lost, as though she had given up a part of herself that could never be returned. She needed Stephen. She needed his love and his forgiveness, even if she didn't deserve it. The next evening, Clara sat in the living room, her hands folded in her lap as she tried to steady her breathing. The apartment felt like a prison, and the weight of her own actions hung over her like a dark cloud. Her phone rang, and her heart stopped. It was Stephen. "Clara," his voice came through the phone, rough with emotion. "I know you've been pulling away from me. I don't know what's going on, but I need to see you. Let's have a date this Friday." Clara nodded. "No problem, Stephen. I will come around." It was a calm Friday evening. Stephen and Clara sat at a cozy corner in a modern eatery downtown. soft music in the background, the scent of grilled chicken and peppered sauce floating in the air. It wasn't a fancy outing, just a simple date. 2 plates of jollof rice, a bottle of chilled malt, and the kind of laughter that came from deep comfort. Clara wore a simple yellow dress, her hair in a soft bun, glowing like sunset. Stephen couldn't take his eyes off her. She kept talking, smiling, teasing him about how he always eats the meat first before touching the rice. But deep down, Stephen's heart was racing. He had something planned, something big. As Clara reached for her drink, Stephen slowly stood up. First, she didn't notice, but when she looked up, Stephen was already on one knee, right there in the middle of the eatery. Clara froze. A hush fell around them. Even the waiter stopped mid-step. Stephen brought out a small ring box, opened it with shaky hands, and looked her in the eye. "Clara, will you marry me?" Her lips parted. She gasped, her hands flying to her chest. Tears welled up in her eyes, and before she could even wipe them, she smiled and shouted, "Yes, yes, Stephen, I will marry you." The room erupted in claps and cheers from strangers who had become witnesses to a love story. Clara stood up, hugged him tight, and everyone could feel the joy radiating from her soul. And guess what? 5 days later, wedding bells started ringing. The date was fixed. Clara's family and Stephen's family met. Celebration began. Because when love is true, you don't need forever to decide, you just know. One afternoon, Lydia was in her room, twisting her hair absent-mindedly, when her phone buzzed. It was a message on her course group chat. Nothing unusual, until she saw the words, "Congrats to Clara and Stephen." Wedding bells loading. Her hand froze. She blinked. Her heart skipped. "Clara? Stephen?" She tapped the message again. Slowly, carefully, and then her worst fear became real. A picture followed. Clara, her supposed best friend, smiling ear to ear with Stephen by her side, both wearing matching outfits, and Clara's left hand proudly raised, showing off a glittering engagement ring. Lydia's chest tightened. She couldn't breathe. The phone nearly slipped from her fingers as her whole body went still. Her mind started spinning. So why? Why her? Why Clara? Why again? Lydia stood up, pacing the room. Her hands on her head, tears filling her eyes, but her heart was full of something heavier than sadness. It was anger. It was envy. It was pain. "Why is it always Clara?" she said, voice shaking. "Why do good things always happen to her? Why is she always the one getting everything? The love, the attention, the life." Lydia's eyes flicked to the phone sitting on the table, the one that held the secret she had been keeping. The video of Clara's meeting with Chief Balogun. The moment when Clara had given up her dignity, her innocence. Lydia had planned to use it against her, to blackmail her when the time was right, to break her even further. But the video, it still remained, a dark weapon she could wield. She picked up the phone, holding it in her hands as if it were a lifeline. "I could still ruin her," she muttered to herself, her fingers hovering over the play button. The wedding was supposed to be the happiest day of Clara's life. After everything she had been through, after the loss of her parents and her brother, she had finally found someone to build a future with. Stephen had been her rock through it all. His gentle nature, his patience, and his unconditional love had healed the parts of her that were broken. As the wedding day drew closer, Clara's excitement grew. She had the perfect dress, the perfect venue, and a fiancé who loved her. It was everything she had ever dreamed of. She had even invited Lydia, hoping that despite everything that had happened between them, Lydia would show up and be there for her. But what Clara didn't know was that Lydia had a different plan. The events of the past few weeks, her betrayal, her manipulation, had left Lydia with a dark hunger. She wasn't just going to let Clara have the happy ending she felt she deserved. No, Lydia was after Clara's fall. Lydia had kept the video of Clara's encounter with Chief Balogun locked away in her phone. The video was her secret weapon. She had promised herself that one day, when the time was right, she would expose Clara for what she really was. A girl who had sold herself for money, for survival. And that day had arrived. It was a beautiful Saturday afternoon, and the church was filled with Clara's friends and family, all gathered to witness the union between Clara and Stephen. The sun shone through the stained glass windows, casting colorful light onto the pews. Clara stood at the altar, her heart racing with excitement. The day she had been dreaming of for so long was finally here. Her wedding to Stephen, the man she loved. As she gazed at him, standing across from her with a smile that made her stomach flutter, she felt a rush of happiness. The church was packed with friends and family, all gathered to witness the union of the perfect couple. It was supposed to be the happiest day of Clara's life. After everything she had been through, the loss of her parents, her brother, and all the hardships she had faced, this was her moment of victory. She had fought so hard to get here, and now she was ready to start a new chapter with Stephen. Lydia sat in the front row, her face expressionless, her eyes cold. She had made sure that everything would go according to her plan. She had contacted Silas, the thug she had used before, and had paid him handsomely to ensure the video of Clara's secret affair with Chief Balogun was played at the perfect moment. The pastor's voice rang out asking the guests to stand and witness the vows. Clara's nerves tightened, but she couldn't help the smile that spread across her face as she looked at Stephen. He was everything she had ever wanted, kind, strong, and full of love. "I do," she whispered, her voice filled with emotion as she spoke her vows, and Stephen's smile deepened, his eyes shining with pride. But just as the wedding ceremony was about to reach its most sacred moment, when the pastor was about to pronounce them husband and wife, everything came to a screeching halt. A figure in the back of the church stood up, Silas, the man who Lydia had secretly hired for this very moment. His presence was like a dark shadow in the room, his movements calculated and deliberate. His eyes met Clara's for the briefest moment before he began walking toward the altar with purpose. Clara's heart dropped as he approached the front, the heavy silence in the church now filled with dread. Her breath caught in her throat. "What's going on?" she whispered to herself. "Stop the ceremony," Silas called out, his voice loud and commanding, drawing the attention of everyone in the room. The guests shifted in their seats, confusion spreading through the congregation. From the back of the church, Silas walked down the aisle, his presence commanding attention. In his hand was a large video camera. He moved with purpose, stepping towards the altar with a cold, almost eerie determination. Clara froze. Her heart dropped into her stomach as Silas reached the front and turned to the congregation, holding up the camera. "Everyone needs to see this," Silas's voice echoed, causing the guests to shift uncomfortably in their seats. "This is the real Clara. The woman you're about to marry." "Clara!" Silas shouted. "You have something to hide." Before Clara could react, Silas walked up to the altar, holding up a large video screen for everyone to see. The guests gasped, and Clara's eyes widened in horror as the screen flickered to life. There she was on the video, Clara, in a hotel room, sitting with Chief Balogun, the man who had taken advantage of her when she was desperate. The video showed her at her weakest moment, the moment she had been trying to forget. She watched herself on the screen, the shame flooding her as the people she loved, the people who had come to celebrate her wedding, saw her at her most vulnerable. The camera zoomed in on her face, the tear-filled eyes, the hesitation, the submission. Clara froze, her body paralyzed by the humiliation. This was her secret, the one thing she had tried to bury, and now it was on full display for everyone to see. The church erupted into whispers, gasps, and murmurs. "Clara, is this true?" Stephen's voice was barely audible, filled with disbelief and pain. His face twisted in shock as he looked at her, the woman he thought he knew, standing before him in front of their friends and family. Tears filled Clara's eyes as she looked back at Stephen, her voice cracking. "Stephen, please. I never wanted anyone to know. I never meant for this to happen." Stephen's face hardened, and without another word, he turned and walked away, his footsteps heavy with the weight of betrayal. The room was chaos. People were shouting, pointing, whispering about her. Clara's legs gave out and she collapsed onto the floor, her hands trembling in her lap. She could hear Lydia's voice, pretending to comfort her, but it felt like a distant echo. Lydia, sitting in the front row, looked at Clara with feigned sympathy, her hands folded together as if praying for her, though her eyes gleamed with something darker. "Clara," Lydia said, approaching her with false concern, her voice soft. "I'm so sorry. This wasn't supposed to happen like this. We'll figure this out. You're not alone." The days following the wedding were a blur of pain, shame, and heartbreak. Clara had tried to reach out to Stephen, but he had disappeared, not wanting to speak to her again. The betrayal had been too much for him to bear. Clara didn't know where to turn. She had lost everything. Her dignity, her love, her future. Her wedding day had ended in public disgrace, and the world she had tried so hard to build was now nothing more than rubble. But there was one thing Clara needed to know. Who was behind this? Who had destroyed her life in front of everyone she cared about? Late one night, as Clara sat alone in her apartment, the doorbell rang. She hesitated, unsure who it could be. But when she opened the door, her eyes widened in shock. It was Silas, the man who had ruined her wedding. "Clara," Silas said, his voice filled with guilt. "I need to talk to you. Please, just hear me out." Clara stood there, her body stiff with anger. "What do you want? What more could you possibly have to say to me?" Silas looked down, clearly uncomfortable. "I was just doing what I was paid to do. But something's been eating at me ever since. I can't sleep. I can't stop thinking about what I've done." Clara's breath hitched. "You've already done enough." Silas looked up at her, his face full of regret. "No, listen to me. I need to tell you the truth. It wasn't just me. I didn't come up with this on my own. Someone else hired me. Someone who wanted to see you fall." Clara's heart stopped. "Who?" she demanded, her voice rising. "Who did this to me?" Silas swallowed hard, the words tumbling out. "It was Lydia, your best friend. She paid me to do it. She wanted to destroy you, to tear you down. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't live with myself anymore. I'm sorry. I never should have done it." Clara stared at him in disbelief, the shock of his words crashing over her like a tidal wave. "Lydia," she whispered, her voice shaking. "How could she do this to me? She's my friend." Silas nodded, his face filled with guilt. "She said you'd never learn. She thought you'd ruin yourself and that she'd take the place you left behind." Clara's mind was racing. Lydia, the one person she had trusted more than anyone, had been the one to betray her. She had been the one to ruin her life for the sake of jealousy and revenge. Without thinking, Clara turned and ran out the door. She needed to confront Lydia. She needed to hear it from her. When Clara arrived at Lydia's apartment, she didn't hesitate. She burst through the door, her heart pounding with a mix of rage and heartbreak. "Lydia!" Clara shouted. How could you do this to me?" Lydia stood in the doorway, looking shocked. "Clara, what are you talking about?" "Don't act like you don't know," Clara yelled, stepping closer. "You hired Silas. You had the video played at my wedding. You wanted to destroy me. Why? Why would you do that?" Lydia's expression shifted, and for the first time, Clara saw something like bitterness in her eyes. "Because you never appreciated what you had. You were always perfect, always the good girl, and I couldn't stand it. You made me feel small. You made me feel worthless. I wanted to see you fall." Clara recoiled, the pain too much to bear. "I trusted you, Lydia. You were my best friend. How could you do this?" Lydia stepped back, her voice cold. "You were always the perfect one. You had everything, and I had nothing. I was just tired of watching you have it all." Clara's tears fell freely now, her heart broken. She turned to leave, but Lydia's next words froze her in place. "You can't escape it, Clara," Lydia said quietly. "This is who you are. You're nothing without me. Clara didn't respond. She didn't need to. The betrayal was complete. Clara burst out of Lydia's room, face soaked with tears, lips trembling, heart broken into pieces. She didn't say a word to anyone, just kept walking, her hands clutched to her chest like she was holding her soul from falling apart. Moments later, a strange sound escaped from Lydia's room. A mix of laughter and screams. The kind of sound that made all the neighbors freeze, like cold water had been poured straight down their spines. And just when the neighbors thought it was over, Lydia stepped out and every single neighbor stood still, watching in shock, like time had paused. Lydia stormed out, her hair scattered like a mad wind had passed through it. She was laughing, but her eyes? Empty. Hollow. Lost. With shaky hands, she began tearing her clothes, one after the other, muttering things no one could understand. "I didn't mean to. Clara. I didn't mean to. He told me he didn't love you anymore." People screamed. Some rushed to hold her, but Lydia fought them off like a wounded animal. She dropped to the floor, clutching her head, rocking back and forth. And right there, in front of the whole compound, Lydia went mad. The betrayal was deep, too deep. The next day, as Clara walked through the market, she heard frantic footsteps behind her. She turned around to find Lydia running toward her. But this time, something was wrong. Lydia's eyes were wide, her movements erratic. "Clara!" Lydia shouted, her voice trembling. Before Clara could react, Lydia collapsed on the ground, her body twitching violently, her face twisted in anguish, and Clara watched in horror as Lydia was consumed by a madness she couldn't control. The ambulance arrived moments later, and Lydia was taken away. The doctors said she had suffered a mental breakdown, but Clara knew the truth. The guilt, the shame, the hatred that Lydia had carried had destroyed her. We have come to the end of the story. Join me next time for another captivating story. Trust me, you won't want to miss it. Before you go, please help me grow this community. Click the like and share button. Subscribe to my YouTube channel for more interesting African stories. I honestly got you covered. Thanks for your time.